And we are live. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in this chat with the legendary JJ, who is author of the Market Vibes newsletter, which, if you don't already know, you should definitely check out. Not only is it one of the most popular markets newsletters out there, but is also, I can say from experience, because I've looked at most of them, it is easily for me the most enjoyable. I enjoy it very much, not just for the information that JJ imparts, because there are very few out there writing that have his experience in the markets. But what I most enjoy, I'm not a trader, as you probably know, what I most enjoy are the narratives, the stories, the mood, the market vibes that he brings. I learn so much from that. So JJ, thank you so much for giving us some of your very valuable time.
Thank you, Noel. It's a pleasure to be here. I've never spoken about writing before, except maybe with other writers, but not in a forum like this. And I haven't prepared for it because I pretty much have no clue how to, what I'm going to say. So I'm in your hands. Whatever you ask, I'll do my best to answer. So let's begin.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And again, one of the things that I personally value about what you do is your authenticity. I mean, it's just always very honest what you write. And so I have no doubt that you'll be spilling some secrets, trade secrets to the audience today. It's also why I wanted to do this limited series. I'm only going to do a few of them with newsletter writers that I very much admire, because we don't talk much about newsletter writing. You and I spend a lot of our days writing, but it's something that we tend to do in solitude and in silence. And there's a lot that goes into it. It's work, and it's also exciting, and there are frustrations. And so I thought it's time that we start talking more about them, especially these days that more and more people are interested in newsletter writing. It is a valid form, a valuable form of communication, and it's harder than it looks. If it looks easy, it means you're doing a very good job. It's definitely not easy. Now, JJ, for those that don't know you, I imagine most of our audience checking in does, but for those that don't, could you please give us some background on your very storied career?
Okay, Wall Street. Excuse me, came from a regular American family. I butted heads with my dad and mom. Left home many times, came back and so forth. And I got a job because my father helped me as a runner on Wall Street, and that was when I was just out of school. And in those days, the markets were just growing, so I went from runner to account executive, actually. Then I bought some seats. I went to the floor. Um,
What year
made,
was this?
sorry,
What year was this?
77. Uh, I started as a runner in 75. So between 75 and 77, I bought my first seat in 77. It took me a couple of years. I bought a Merck seat for 10 grand. That's on the NYMEX. And I traded potatoes. So when I made more money, I moved up in the world, and I bought a COMEX seat and started trading gold, silver. And I had a really up and down career. In those days, the people that went to the floor, we weren't geniuses. We weren't like Druckenmiller or anything like that. Trading on the floor was making prices. There was no Bloomberg, no computers, no charts or anything like that. What you did is you took in information osmotically from what was coming in around you, and you learned to get the edge. If somebody wanted to buy them, you sold them. If you wanted to sell them, I'll buy them, and that was pretty much it. And then as the market evolved, and so forth. But as far as writing is concerned, I've always been a writer. I started writing in 8th grade. I always got A's in that. I hated math. I like sports, but writing carried me through my childhood. I always wrote to my parents when I was away. I wrote to my friends. They were like, "What are you doing writing me letters?" And so when I became a broker, I became a broker who writes. And even though, in the beginning, and I'd say this for anybody who's a writer, you know, you're going to be really frustrated because your writing's going to be really shitty. It's going to be childish. And oh, did I lose you there? Yeah. So, but it gets better. If you're disciplined and you write every day, you have to want to write, and you have to you have to have something to say. 'Cause if you don't have something to say, it just doesn't work. But then you have to gather the tools to say it, and that's very much like going to the gym. Um, I I profoundly believe you should always write in the same place every day, pretty much the same time, the same routine. Whether you don't wanna write or whether you do wanna write, you should write. So, the reason a lot of people say to me, "Wow, you write twice a day." And I do it because I want to, right? Substack is not a pot of gold. It's not like trading. It's not like selling on a crude and have it break $2. It's nothing like that. It's tedious. Like, if you see my evening wrap coming through at about midnight, that means I did not wanna write that.
But you do anyway, because it's like going to the gym.
It is, and in order to gather the tools, you have to have a very, uh, I think, disciplined reading life to a certain extent, not like, it's hard. Like, I have a lot of friends on Substack who are writers, and I owe it to them to read their stuff, but I can't read their stuff every day, and I don't expect them to read my stuff, like, because we're busy,
Mm.
either trading or you're trying to think about Bitcoin, so you just can't read everyone. But a couple of really important things I think to get off the ground as far as the go to the gym thing is just you need to have a a really good grasp of language and the type of language which you can flip around with different personalities. You can be hoity-toity intellectual about certain things like that, and you can be like, street smart about other things. You can interweave these things in ways where if as you do them, your vocabulary goes up, right? And every day when you're writing, you've got an idea, all these words are out there. Say, pick me. No, no, no. You know, and you want to say something is, boring. Well, you can say soporific or desultory or necrotic. You know, these are words that are going to be unusual for the reader. You can't use too many of them or you lose credibility. That's stupid. But every now and then, you put one of those in there, and he's going to go, "Ah, what's that?" The greatest compliment, if you're writing particularly like that, you're challenging the reader to say, "I don't really understand that word. I'm gonna go check it out," right?
Mm.
And all words with that type of curiosity are excitement. And, you don't wanna just say, gold is down or silver's up or anything like that because why? Anybody can look at a chart.
Yeah.
But you want to add life to that chart, your life, your energy. So those are some of the things which I was given at the start. So my English teachers always liked me, and I would always, ask them like, I don't know, how am I doing, that kind of thing. I'd connect with them. And I never connected with math teachers. They were always like D, F.
That's refreshing though, because it ties into what you said earlier about on the pit and reading people, I guess. I mean, you're making a market in a way, you're reading people. You don't need math for that. It's about communication more than anything else.
You need to be numerate.
One thing that
That's
you meant, sorry?
that's the difference. You had to be numerate, right?
Yeah.
The eh,
That's not the same thing as maths though.
trig? No.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Range.
Being numerate is street smart, whereas maths is concepts.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Although, um, when they shut the floors and we couldn't make markets in the pits anymore, I thought, "What am I gonna do?" Because all my friends went home and they tried to trade, and we all lost like $200,000 right away in the first month. So I learned to write code. so that I could automate some of my trading and I had a better understanding of what I was competing with. And that I still lost money. So you know, I told this story before, so if anybody's listening, you hear it. Yeah. One day, I had a barn and I was like spending 3 days in my pajamas, not shaving, writing code, trying to solve the riddle of the universe. My wife came in and she said, "If you do not get out of that chair and get a job, I will divorce you and take whatever money we have left." So
That's the ultimatum, right?
I did. So I went back to work. I wasn't hard. Got right back into the flow of the new thing. I wound up working at a bank. I worked for ADM for a few years and learned to work in an office, which is a bit of a social transition, but it's not an intellectual transition. And
No,
all
it's
the
also
while, I kept writing.
yeah, and the office, trading, very different social constructs, as you say, but also just great training in people and in communication, very different communication styles. One thing that you managed to do, you're talking about choosing words. I often find constructing a sentence is a bit like wrestling sometimes. You got your words, you got to wrestle them into the right order. One thing you managed to do extremely well, apart from imbue entire market segments with personality, is rhythm. Your rhythm is excellent in writing. And I've also noticed that in your newsletter, you throw in a lot of music links every now and then. Has music played a big part in your life? And do you think that's influenced your writing?
Okay, so again, discipline, right? If you look at my daily, market vibe, I begin with the news of the day because it's, you know, it's very selective what you choose to trade on, right? So of all the things that are out there, and I know you're reading, everybody else is reading, it's what you pick, right? So I look for one or two things that I think are important, and that's going to set the mood or the tone for where we're going to go, right? And I have to be pretty careful with that because sometimes I I'm I'm angry or you know selfish sometimes, that I've learned to completely exercise any sense of politics, I think, except for you can't help it with a guy like Trump out there, right? And I have written on a stick up, I would say, never use this word, Trump. Do not write that word,
That's a
no matter
totally different
how you
twist
have
on
to
the Trump
say it,
syndrome, right? Totally
but
different twist on
you
Trump syndrome.
cannot
Yeah.
help but say it, right? And when you do, as soon as you go there, you're going into a very prickly area where everybody has their own views on what's right and wrong in that. And there is no right or wrong otherwise. So, but you cannot relate to markets without saying it.
Yeah.
So you have to just say what you have to say and be as courteous as you can. And imagine yourself, you're sitting at a table, with 50 people, we're all eating and having a conversation together. You don't want to like drool on yourself or do something gross. So you know where to stay away from. So, that's the news part. One or two things. Um, been focusing on oil mostly. Then I read about the markets and just say the markets. I start with this top line market. So if it's stocks come first, right? If it's crude and it's crude now, that comes first. And then you go down the way. I always, no offense, end with Bitcoin. Not because I don't think Bitcoin is great. It's just become a habit for me because I know the least about it. And so I just apply, my years of experience to what I see, and it's it's enough, I think, for people who trade to say, okay, he's not. There's no pretenses there. It's just I own it, so I can at least speak from that perspective.
Your newsletter, right? You once wrote, I think this was a few months ago, that you confessed to never knowing what you're going to write about when you sit down at the keyboard. And I thought that was fascinating. I often get asked, how do you find something to write about every single day? Which blows my mind because for me, it's always, what do I have to leave out? Because I just don't have time. There's so much going on. But when you sit down at your keyboard, is it still the case you have no idea what you're going to write about? Or is it just sometimes you'll let yourself get inspired and go off on a tangent?
Well, for market vibes, I do, like, I get a slam of 2 cups of strong black coffee, and by the way, by the time I'm in halfway through the second one, I know what I'm gonna write, because 'cause I'm reading a lot of stuff, and I'm looking for, like, sparkles and peaks that I can write about, and that's very, very hard these days. I mean, gold hasn't done anything for months, and silver either, right? And crude, although it has a phenomenal narrative to write about and a lot of crazy characters in it, the market action has been really disappointing. So it it can't be a lot of randomness when I'm writing about those things. You have to think really hard because it's it's easy to fall into a rut where you say, "Oh, this is boring, and that's boring, and, that's no fun, and I'm not long this, and I have no position in that." Well, why bother? So that part, uh, I have a starting point. I don't know where it's gonna take me, but, like, I saw this morning that, China has, been importing 3.5 million barrels a day less than they had been reporting for, I guess, the last 14 months. So if you extrapolate that into, the forward period, we're talking about millions of barrels of demand have just lopped off and fallen away from the market. So from that point, I knew exactly where it was going because we had NFP coming up, right? And I saw ADP yesterday was hot. So wait a minute, wait, we're in an energy crisis here. People are supposed to be staying home from work. They're not supposed to be driving. Well, they're actually all going to work and making money. And then when NFP came in hot today, I thought, well, you know, hey, and I have been calling bullshit on just about everything in crude since the war started. No one's dying. Wait a minute, this is a war. 15 Americans are dead. Wait, that doesn't ring war to me, And plus, you go on down. So, whether anybody wants to admit it or not, first of all, it's not a war. Not even close to a war. Expensive, but it's had zero impact on the global economy. China's importing less. They're selling crude. Wait a minute, you know. So
Keeping what's keeping the price where it is.
what does that mean for the rest of the markets? Because they've been telling us, this is the end of the world for fixed income. Interest
Yeah.
rates are going to 6%.
On the sort of end of the world narratives, which I imagine, you swim in them, you reject them, but we're swimming in them. Any of us who are scrolling headlines or looking at social media feeds tend to be swimming in a lot of the end of the world narratives, and it can get very scary. And you also mentioned earlier you try not to mention the US president, although it's very hard to. And I imagine there are all sorts of, hopes and also feelings behind that. I think this is going to sound like a strange question. Where I'm heading with all this is, do you ever feel that the noise gets loud? And if so, how do you step back and quieten the noise? And of course, I am asking for a friend.
Uh, well, what when the noise is loud, yell louder
Mm, I
because you
like
won't
that.
be heard. That's the
Yeah,
way it is in the pit.
yeah.
If you have a
Wade
thousand
right
to
in. Yeah,
sell, you got to tell them, right? You don't go in there and say, "I sell 1,005," right? No, you're you
yell louder.
you
I like that. There's a British saying I like very much also, which is if you're going to get wet, you might as well go swimming.
when there's nothing to say, I try anyway to say there's nothing to say in an interesting way.
Yeah. And sometimes
And
the lack of a narrative is a narrative unto itself. I mean, we've seen this in Bitcoin over the past, I guess, for most of this year. Nothing going on. That's actually kind of interesting. Why isn't there anything going on? That's a story unto itself. And now that we're seeing some movement finally, again, is this momentum? No, not anyway. That's a whole different story. And hi, everyone joining us. Do throw in questions if you have any for JJ, but this is not a markets chat, not a crypto chat, not a commodities chat. So do please keep your questions to the art of what he does. I mean, it's rare that we get a chance to actually question him on how he managed to produce such compelling stuff so frequently. JJ, one question I wanted to ask you, but we got drawn into other things. When did Market Vibes first publish?
well, for years I wrote a piece, a morning piece called Various Thoughts. It started as oil thoughts, right? But because I was in crude and I wrote to crude people. But then, when I bounced out, I worked on a grain desk in Chicago in the crash. And then I went to ADM, which is uh, multi-market commission house, FCM. It's the largest non-bank commission house in the world. So a guy, GS, came back to me and said, when are you going to call this something else? Because you're writing about oil. So I made it Various Thoughts. And then when I retired, uh, I had like Doomberg was a wonderfully generous mentor for me because he liked my writing. And so he gave me some pointers to get started. Tony Greer, I don't know if you know him, at Morning Navigator. Uh, he he said, "Various Thoughts is a dead title. Don't Nobody's going to read that, right?" So, with help, I came up with the idea of Market Vibes, and uh, I I I chose the name Alyosha, which is a character which it's really Dostoevsky's son, and he's one of the four brothers, including the illegitimate brother, uh, brothers Karamazov. And Alyosha is a Russian icon. He's one of the most popular characters in Russian literature. And I have always loved Russian literature. Uh, and the reason why I picked him is because he's the good brother. And, when if you're writing every day, you're writing noisy stuff, I can be combative. I can be nasty. I can be mean. I have a lot of skill. I can lie. I don't lie. I try to be honest. But I can craft things in a way, which can be abusive. And so I wanted a character that would sit on my shoulder every day. And every time when I write, and I'll say this to anyone who wants to write, these are really dangerous tools that you're playing with. And the better you get at them, the more you realize how how much damage you can do. So what the first thing you have to do if you have an idea or you need to write is you have to get it out, right? And it's almost like just just a rush, a stream. Don't stop typing. Don't start thinking. Don't start editing. Just get it all on the page, right? Once you've done that, go back and read what you've written because you won't really remember what you've written. It's just gonna gush out, and then you have to ask yourself, would I want to read this? Do I want to read this? That sentence. Like, for instance, I wrote that because, you know, I I hate in my life, my father was a supremely honest man. At least that was my opinion of him. I had tremendous respect for him, so that kind of he's an army guy, that kind of input when you're growing up, that type of, someone to look up to, uh was really a big part of my beginning. Then I go to the floor for years where it's an honor system where you had to honor your trades no matter how bad they were. You're down $1 million. That's just too bad. You're writing it down. That's it.
Your reputation is your asset.
And so in writing, I think I I'll get to this thing. I was I wrote a very extensive piece comparing the IRGC to the Schutzstaffel, the Nazi SS, and they are almost from Genesis to what's happening now, perfect parallels. It's as though that evil that evil found a way to reemerge in a perfect fascist system. And I'm not going to get into the details of it. And so I didn't publish it, and I left it on the hard drive. And I read it again, and I said, "Wow, I would love to publish this." And I thought, "No, you cannot publish that. Because if I did, you know, it it would be like throwing a grenade into a closed room where no one has a chance. No one would be expecting something like that. So it's just the kind of thing that you're going to have when you're writing. You have to be able to not do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But your fingers on the mouse, you've written this thing, you spent days researching it, and it's very important to you. I have to be able to say, no, I'm not going to publish that.
Yeah.
So it's important.
And also the sunk cost fallacy. Sometimes we have to get rid of something we spent time on.
Kill your children.
Yes, well, yeah, a bit
That's
harsh, but yes.
that is the writer saying.
Yeah,
The
and
paragraph above,
be ruthless with the editing. The editing is always the wrestling part, yeah. You've been writing for such a long time that I imagine, but I'm gonna ask this anyway, is there someone in mind that you're writing for when you sit down?
uh, hmm, that's a big question.
Mm.
Yeah.
I ask it because when I find myself feeling overwhelmed and stuck, and that happens, there are days when the blank screen is a bit
Mhm.
intimidating, not because I haven't got topics, but because I'm just feeling a bit overwhelmed or stuck. I imagine someone that I want to talk to, and I write to them instead in the newsletter.
That's a good contrivance. Uh, that's a conversation that you're having. So,
Mm,
whoever that person is. So in Market Vibes, I've gotten to know my subscribers really well. Not all of them because there's so many of them, I never could know them, right? But they are a very curious, very, well-educated community of men and women of, various ages and backgrounds. They are not shy. If I know that if I say something wrong, I'm gonna hear about it because there are enough people out there that are reading my stuff that know the difference between bullshit and good writing. So I know that, I those are my guardrails, and I don't cross them. Uh, man, I think also if you're a good writer, uh, it's important that you write with as much humility as you have energy. It be be careful because, it's like, I don't know what to say. It is an art form. And just like a sculptor who finishes his piece of sculpture, it's gone, right? There's no not coming back. Once you hit send, there it goes, right? So you have to be so in a sense to answer your question, I think I write to the universe. I'm writing to the people who are no longer living. And I'm writing to people who may, if I've written 1,000 pieces in the last 2 years on Substack, and at I guess a daily rate of each piece, well, I try to keep it to I'm a word Nazi, so if you tell me to write 600 words, you wanted a column, I'd give you 600 words within 5 words, just like that, and I'd know it in my mind, because I've written so much. I could write you 1,000 words, I can write you 2,000 words, but when I get up into the thousands, which is the longer piece, then sometimes I can write more. But at any rate, what I wanna do is because Substack doesn't allow that, I've written so much that it's almost impossible for me to find what I've written. It's just like really,
Yeah,
it's like,
and the Substack search engine isn't fantastic. I mean, there are many, many great things about Substack. Their search engine is not one of them yet.
well, they get better.
Mm,
And just a shout out to Substack. Substack is it's it's so unique that you and I can be doing this, right? I I wrote, I sent stuff to Vanity Fair, New York Magazine. I sent stuff. I had friends at the New York Times and Wall Street Journal, and I gave them ideas. I shared writing with them, but I could never get published. And if you can't get published, you die.
mm. Why do you think that was?
The way the hierarchy of the enterprise works, right?
Mm,
You, you it's amazing that someone like Kerouac could have gotten published, or it's not amazing that some of the other writers, particularly in the 20th century. But if you go back to the days, Hemingway and um, even earlier, James Joyce, guys like that. Uh, it had I started reading Hemingway early, Jack London and things like that as a boy. But when I hit the higher stuff or the harder stuff, I, I couldn't read it. I never finished Ulysses, and I don't think I ever will. You know, but other,
neither am I Irish. So.
but I have a library here. It's got a lot of books in it. I try to read most of them. I love Churchill. I've read everything he's written because he's so easy to read, right? And if you think back on, who your favorite authors are, they all get better over time.
Yeah. Do you feel that you've changed in your writing style over time?
Yeah, I, I have. I found myself like,
Yeah.
or if you read it, you're going to be less reading. Yeah.
And also, the longer you do it, the more authentic the voice becomes, which is necessary these days, given that there is so much AI slop out there. That's one of the huge advantages for a voice like yours. It is so obviously not AI, and you can't say that for most markets newsletters these days, unfortunately. How do you interact with readers much? You no doubt get a lot of feedback, as you mentioned on your posts. Some people agree, some people disagree. A lot of people are appreciative. Do you interact with the feedback?
Yeah, I do. It's because a lot of the things that I write about are arcane. And I have a hard, fast rule, and everybody knows this if they subscribe. If you ask me a question about, anything, uh, why I use the directional movement index or Stottlemyre's market profile or how I see it or anything like that, you're going to get 500 words from me, period, no matter who you are. So you're going to get a detailed, complete answer, which is available to everyone else who hasn't, I don't know, the confidence to actually say, "Hey, how does that work?" So I do that over and over again as needed. Market Vibes is a Socratic environment, right? So what my job is to take things that we're all gonna see every day, that everybody has a certain amount of risk with, and throw it out there, sometimes in a provocative way, for people to challenge either me or themselves to say, "Is he right?" And I don't care. Like, I have some Canadian subscribers who are, I would say, I'm politically, I am an old school, Southern Democrat, liberal Democrat type guy, fiscally conservative, socially very, very liberal. Um, and so these guys, they're heavily liberal. So, if I say anything favorable in a conservative light, bam, smack down. And I invite that. I want that.
Yeah. Do you find having a paywall helps? Your paywall is low. It's a very affordable subscription, but do you find having even that minimal amount helps filter out the I won't use the word crackpots, but I guess I will use the word crackpots and those that actually just want to debate?
No, 'cause I edit out the crackpots. I never do anything publicly, but I go offline and I say, "Hey, dude, what are you doing?" Or, there's no reason for that. Like, anything you can say anything in market vibes as long as you have an intelligent, well thought out, idea and it's respectful, right? I mean, no nastiness is permitted, and I'm very quick at not at I haven't had to do it, but, I'll you know, I will do it. Um, and so that as I said, community of educated men and women, that are not really looking for a tutorial in personal life or anything like that. We want to we want to make money and we want to have ideas because e- every profitable trade starts with an idea, whether it's yours or someone else's. And as it gets kicked around, the idea gets better or worse or discarded, and more comes in.
Yeah, or connects with other ideas, which brings me to another thing that I value about your newsletter. It's very deep on markets. Love the markets vibes section, as I said, but it's more than markets. You throw in Gary Larson cartoons, you post links to videos and sometimes music. And what I value about that is it positions markets as part of life, not as a standalone segment, not as this is all we're going to talk about. No, markets are life really. And you managed to convey that, which leads me to the question of what's your, I guess, what would the business school graduates call it? Your production function. How do you get the content? Where do you get your information? What sources do you use? And also the vast repository of cool links you come up with. Where do you get those from?
Okay, so the meat of the market vibes thing is always the charts and my technical analysis, which I write with great confidence. There's absolutely no one can shake me in what I'm saying. I can be wrong, and I am wrong. And I am, you know, I'm glad to be wrong because I know, good trading is not about being right. Everybody can adjust their thinking to winning lotto. Big deal, right? What good trading is being able to manage risk. And that means to accept being wrong, embrace it, and move on. You lost money. Too bad, right? You made a bad trade. I got a silver in December. I've missed the last $40, and I've been riding silver since early 2024. But once you're out, you're out. You don't go back in. You don't sell silver at 85 and come back and buy it at 105, 105. You discipline. That's and you don't feather out. Oh, I've got 50 on. I'll sell three. I'll sell two. You decide you're going to get out, you get out, and you take the blotter down to 0, and that's it, end of story. If you have another trade, it's an entirely new trade and something like that. So, that's hard stuff, and I sometimes, it's it's it makes people unhappy, I guess, so and then when I get to the vibe sometimes, that's my personal space where I can say pretty much whatever I want, and I try to be nice most of the time. Sometimes I say things that, piss people off, and so I leave them always with a a Larson joke, which is a smile, right? And usually some music, and I have very eclectic taste in music. I like everything, right? Recently, I've been a kind of like a country boy stuff uh, but, I like hard rock, I like classical, and whatever my mood is when I'm writing is usually the type of music that I finally wind up with, and there you go, and if you don't wanna listen to the music, or if you don't like country music, you're gonna know it right away, and so, boom, like today, I finished with, Bob Dylan and Newport Beach in 1964 singing, Mr. Tambourine Man, which is probably one of the most beautiful poems ever written since, you know, the beginning of time. But uh, you know, I was talking about truth and today that was my deeper theme from the beginning to the end in many, many different ways, and so, I think that's what it's for, a little call it dessert, the end of a meal.
Nice. And again, part of us, I don't know, you find this, it helps us understand what we're thinking also, putting it into words. It helps not just with learning, but also understanding. JJ, we've run way over time, and I do have a couple more questions I really want to get to. So I'm going to beg your indulgence and extend a few more minutes if that's okay with you. And also, we're getting some really good questions from the audience. I want to get to them as well. So before we go to the audience questions and then we wrap up, I do want to see, what does your typical day look like? What time do you sit down, start writing? What time do you finish? What happens in between?
Well, usually I get up around 5, quarter of 5. Um, I check my mail. I look at whatever I have coming in from overnight on Substack because I write to Asia, and, I made a lot of friends out there. Then as I say, I drink coffee, which gives me a little bit of a boost, I guess, and, sit down and start writing. I look at the markets, but after all these years, I'm gonna quote a friend of mine by saying, "If I look at the price of gold, I know where everything else is." All I really do need to do is see that one price. But, now it's crude, so if I look at crude, I know where everything else is. If crude is higher, I know, bonds are gonna be down, gold will be soft. All I need to do is just see that one price. So that you know, if I have Bitcoin on, I can see it on the screen. So then I start writing. So, this will probably be more interesting. It's a discipline because sometimes you don't wanna do it, particularly, like, if you're seeing the morning piece coming out at 11, you know, I I really fought with that one. And sometimes I admit it. I say, "Hey, I'm sorry, this is coming out so late, but I really struggled with writing this piece." And, if you see it at 8:30, like, it was easy to write yesterday and today, I didn't even have to think about it. I knew exactly all I had to boom, 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 and and that's great. So then I can get on with my day. I'm a gardener. I live in a very nice 7-acre property, bunch of old trees. Um, good. So I like that. My wife and I do gardening together. Um, what else? That's pretty much it. Interact with the family a little bit. Walk to town. I cycle in the afternoon. Try to ride 20 miles a day. At my age, that's like the fountain of youth. I don't smoke. I drink wine, probably on the weekends. I would drink more if I were less disciplined.
Discipline in everything, as you've been
That's it,
saying.
and then I go to bed around 9, you know, usually.
I love the part about gardening, very grounding in all senses of the word, because we talked about overwhelm before. And something that you mentioned before we hit live was the volume of stuff we want to read and learn versus the amount of time we can actually spend thinking. How do you divide that?
Random.
Yeah.
I'll read as much as I
I
need
think
to, you know? If I get into something and if I find an author I like, I'll read everything he writes or her, and I won't stop until I've read everything, right?
yeah.
And thinking, I only think as much as I need to because thinking is almost sometimes it's an instantaneous process. The thought comes up, oh, you know what? Now we're off. If I don't have it right, there are times I don't. Sometimes I don't write, and I know that some of the readers are like saying, like, "What guy wrote me the other day?" He said, "Hey, I didn't get to this evening rap last night. What's happening? What are you doing?" I just didn't have enough energy, and I didn't feel good enough about what I wanted to say, or I didn't have it to say, or something, so I just didn't do it.
Yes. And again, that's authentic. And it's not as if you don't deliver enough content for the users anyway, that every now and then they're going to forgive that. I want to dive into some of the reader questions before we wrap up. Thank you for time. Apologies for that. Okay, because I really appreciate a lot of appreciation in the comment, by the way. A question to JJ is, how do you manage to have this is from Fortune. Thanks very much, Fortune. How do you manage to have a different point of view than what we read mainstream? Your perspectives are not just to oppose, but well researched. Could you shed some light on your research process? I think you've
Okay,
answered them already, but summarize, please.
so I apologize. I have a gardener who works for me, and she happens to be outside right now with a backpack blower going full blast. And
We can hear you, though.
can you read that for me again, please? That's why I'm leaning forward.
Okay, we can hear you. That's right. You can't hear me. Okay. How do you manage to have a different point of view than what we read mainstream? Could you shed some light on your research process?
Uh, how do I have a different point of view than the mainstream? Is the question. No, actually, I just
What
know.
even is
I
mainstream,
just
really?
know what I know. You
Yeah.
know,
And what
and
even is mainstream?
and if I have doubts, I have ChatGPT, I have Grok, and I have Gemini, right?
Mm,
And those are all the dumb AIs. And Grok is the most human I have found of all of them. And I'll ask him. I'll say, is this right? What do you think of that? Or what I'll do is this works for me. I type up a fake sent question and I throw it all three all at once and look at what comes back. It's remarkable how tilted uh, AI is. I don't want to say dishonest, but you know,
mainstream.
so just you know, off, I would say, pretty much. And the more off I have from that type of thing, the more comfortable I am in what I'm actually thinking. So then I pursue that, with facts as well as I possibly can. I just do
Yeah.
Google searches and that ever. Mostly, I don't ask for opinions or information from. I usually go to Grok uh, per se. I ask for links and sources. So if I think that they're shooting people in Iran, like in January. They said they were killing 3,000, 40,000, or anything like that. I said, I want as many leaks as I can get, anecdotal, you know, even back channel stuff
On the
from
ground
multiple
stuff.
sources. And then I would read, because I know that's exactly what AI was going to do. And I just do it myself.
Yeah. And I think I remember you shared some of the links that you came across, which are not the normal links that the mainstream media would feed us. I found that very valuable. This also answers a question of, do you use AI to write? Obviously not, but for research, sometimes useful. Here's a nice one. Were you a great writer before you became a great trader? I know you sort of answered this. You've been writing for a very long time, but it's a nice question, so I'm going to throw it at you again.
Uh,
Oh, Philip goes on to say,
I,
it's not often to read someone with your knowledge of the markets who is so clever with their message.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the compliment. I've always written. I've always been a writer. I've always written, as I said, letters. I enjoyed writing in school, and as soon as I went to the markets, I wrote reports actually in the beginning, which no one did. You know, as soon as I became an account executive, working for Connie Commodities, late late '76, early '77. I wrote a report on gold, something I've never done before. I was not a research analyst. There was tons of stuff out there, but I wrote it anyway. And, I took it up and down 47th Street and I dropped it off at the front desk of all the different refiners and jewelers because I thought they'd be gold clients. And I got a call from almost every one of them. And I got a lot of accounts that way. And so I sent it out to bankers in Switzerland. And, I was the way I think the first thing writing is a way to connect, and you you find, you'll find your voice, even though it's hard at first. Like I said, you got to go to the gym. You've got to do it every day. You've got to build the discipline, build your vocabulary, listen to people speaking to you, that they're writing back, right? So writing is, if you want to get letters, write letters. And there's absolutely nothing more exciting for a child than to go to the mailbox and have a letter addressed to him.
Yeah.
And
Just
bio biofeedback. Yeah. So there's that. So I had that, and then I started training. I did what everybody else did because, I'm a kid and a bunch of old men standing around a ring. And the old dogs teach the young dogs, how to survive. And that's the way it works. So I have that basic approach to markets. Um, I'm never going to be a genius.
yeah.
Trading is a job.
But you've got the unique combination of depth of experience. There are very few, I don't know of anyone writing today that has your length and depth of experience. And you write well. That you've got it, you write with punch, you write with rhythm, and you write with a sort of stimulating clarity as well as the authenticity of your voice. I find very refreshing. So as we wrap up, and again, thank you for the extra time. What advice would you give to anyone watching that might be interested in starting to write a newsletter with the hopes of perhaps one day in the future reaching as a similar quality to yours?
Don't give up. It's the steepest hill is the first hill, and that's where everyone dies. You know, just take the blows, take the say all the times you're going to say, "Oh, we shouldn't say that. Oh, we shouldn't write that. Oh, how could I have written that? How terrible that is!" Right? Just power through it, because I I think it's it's as much about desire to write, and you won't write. You'll never write well if you don't want to. It's not the kind of thing where you think, "Oh, he's a writer. I want to be a writer." I wish I could paint like Van Gogh. That's
Yeah.
never going to happen, right?
And
Do it.
again, if you do it, if you're good at it, you tend to make it look easy so other people think that they can do it too. And I would throw in the advice, keep your expectations realistic. It's not easy. What JJ does is not easy. It requires discipline, it requires a hard slog, and it requires persistence. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, and it, there has to be an element of pleasure in it.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
if you don't, not talking money.
Yes.
Like I said, you said, hey, Thunberg said to me, when I went to see him, he said, "Yeah, you're a good writer, but you need to learn a few things." So he asked me to say, why I'm writing on Substack. He said, "If you want to make money, I'll tell you how to make money." I said, at my time in life, I'm not in it for money. The reason why I'm writing, and that's what I want to wrap up with this, is there are, as you say, very few people like me left that still have the energy to do what I'm doing. And when I'm gone, there won't be any more. I'm, a handful of guys like me. So I wanted to write it down in a way that, you know, at least I could leave it behind if anybody wanted it, right? If anybody wants to know what it was like and see life the way I see it, you can read it. You can go back if you're interested in what's going to happen in sober. You can go back to 2025, October 2024. Say, well, what did he write? And you will know exactly what was happening on that day.
Yeah,
Which
totally great chord. I'll add to the only one that has the energy as well as the experience to being one of the only ones that has the generosity of spirit to be willing to share your depth of experience with us. And so for that, I thank you. I am a very happy subscriber. I love what, as I said, love the way that you encapsulate markets as part of life and you tell the story. The stories are the most valuable part, and the understanding of the stories does come from experience as well as the big picture perspective that you bring. So, on behalf of everyone, thank you. And thank you so much for giving us so much of your time today. Realized I was going to wrap up half an hour ago, but I couldn't stop listening. There's so much more I would have liked to talk about, could talk to you all day. So again, thank you very much for anyone watching. This will be uploaded onto Crypto's Macro Now soon. I think JJ will also get a copy, but I'm not sure where. Anyways, there's a recording which you can no doubt watch again and again. I'm sure I'll be watching it again too. Thank you very
You're
much,
welcome.
everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
Bye,
JJ.
everyone.